Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. If you are new here, if you haven't listened to any of my episodes before, my name is Monica Yates. By the way, for everyone that's like wondering and you haven't listened to the wedding Q&A episode with just me, I'm not changing my last name for work. I will still go by Monica Yates. I'm going to change it legally, but honestly, because I have like 2 passports, visas, like so many things, because I'm not like a citizen of the US. I'm like, could I fuck myself if I change my name with like one thing and then not all of it at the same time? So that's why you hire a lawyer. Anyway, on today's episode, I'm so excited to be diving into this because I feel like we have been waiting for a rom-com of some sort that I could do another episode on. So was it last year? It was probably last year, to be honest, because like we need to start a petition for more rom-coms to come out or the like, whether it's movies, whether it's TV shows. Like, thank God for the new TV show, Nobody Wants This. I think that's what it's called. Oh my God, absolutely hilarious. One of you was like, can you please do a breakdown of that? No, because it was so healthy and great. Don't have anything to say about it besides the fact that it was fabulous. We break down episodes and movies that help you have like a visual of unhealthy behavior so that you can understand kind of what went wrong, what could have been done. So essentially you don't make the same mistakes as these characters made. So the last one that we did, hence it feels like forever ago because it kind of was Sex Life. Was there 2 or 3 series? I don't know, but we need 10 more coming out, please. That's amazing. You guys have also been asking for, what's the one that's like really toxic? Tell Me Lies, not Pretty Little Liars. Tell Me Lies, Tell Me Lies. So that's on my list to watch so I can then break that one down for you. So don't listen to this episode if you have not watched the movie Not This Is Us. It Ends With Us. It Ends With Us. The Blake Lively movie, I fucking loved it. Honestly, I'll take any rom-com at this point. Like literally anything. I will take. My now husband and I went to the movies. He took me on a date. We went to go watch it. I was like, this is great. I know there was some like beef or something around, not Blake Lively's interviews. I haven't watched them, but I know there was some beef around, there was no trigger warning for abuse survivors, like blah, blah, blah. Honestly, I'm like, one, there wasn't actually, in my opinion, that much visual abuse in the TV series, like in the movie. And so I'll go into some assumptions today based on the characters as well. But also number 2, I'm like, watch the fucking trailer. The trailer, I actually thought it was going to be a lot more abuse in the movie because the trailer made it seem a lot more abusive, like physically, than it was. It was a complicated movie because what we'll get into is Ryle as a character is flawed, and like you can feel that he actually has a really good and big heart. So the abuse isn't coming because he's like a horrible person or he's trying to be malicious. The abuse is really coming from his trauma. And that's why I was like, oh, this is a great movie to do a podcast on. Okay, let's dive in, everyone. So number 1, we love Blake Lively. She's hot. Number 2, loved the soundtrack. All right, that's all I'm giving you guys for like pop culture. Now we're going to go into using it as an educational example of what not to do in your relationships. Okay, so firstly, let's talk about mum. We're going to start with going through mum, then a bit of Ryle, and then as a couple. And then I'm basically going through the timeline of the movie as we kind of saw things happen. So it might be helpful before you actually fully keep listening to this episode. If you haven't recently watched the movie, go onto Apple Movies. You can rent it for like, I don't know, $19 something. Rent it or watch it again. So that it's just fresh in your mind. So you know everything I'm talking about. I will set the scene though. I will mention scenes because I've written that down in my notes. So you also know if you haven't watched it for a few weeks. Okay. So the first thing is, I think we could all probably pick this up. Hopefully if you're an avid listener of my podcast, you could. The mum. Lily's mum, I don't know what her name is very codependent. We see that from literally the beginning of the movie where she's as an adult. Lily doesn't get the opportunity to just be a child. Even when she comes home for her dad's funeral, The mother is just so like, Lily, what are we going to do? Lily, what are we going to do? Like, she essentially is relying on her daughter to make her feel safe, which actually can be a really common thing where parents become codependent on their children and like their whole life becomes their children and they lean on them too much. That makes the child feel like they can't be a child. It makes the child feel like they have to be the one soothing and coddling their parents when it actually should be the other way around for like most of your life. Even we all know, even when we're an adult, all we want is our mum to just like soothe us sometimes when we're having a meltdown. We don't want to have to be always doing it, you know, in the opposite. Obviously there are times, like, let's remember that this is like, there's nuances that always exist with what I'm saying. There are times when you do need to soothe your mom because something bad has happened. But for the most part, you shouldn't feel like you are the adult in the relationship. And it seemed like for her whole life, she's been the adult to her mom. Her mother was also obviously kind of clueless, but not about the father's abuse. We kind of saw later on where she made the comment when they were building the nursery. She made the comment of like, it would have been harder to leave, which we'll go into because that is a very, very real thing where when you get sucked into these kind of abusive relationships, it actually becomes harder to leave for so many reasons, whether it's money, whether it's children, whether it's literally the fear of the unknown. And you have no self-worth left. You have no self-confidence left, that it actually feels easier to stay because of those little times that he is nice to you or that she is nice to you. It feels easier to stay than actually leave, which is why knowing the kind of flags and getting out early is important, but not always doable. Like what I think the movie really portrayed. Obviously, if it was a TV series, they could have done like a longer version of this. I think what the movie was great at portraying is the complexities of how hard it can be and how like emotionally hard it can be to leave those sorts of relationships because like you do love the person, but you also are like, this doesn't seem right. So we'll go into that. Okay. But this is something to think about where Lily's mum was so kind of clueless about the father's abuse was something worth like that was enough for her to leave the relationship. And she would obviously say things like, you know, your dad loved you, blah, blah, blah. It's the stuff that is the stuff of like, your dad loves you and the gaslighting and just kind of like, we're telling ourselves what we want to hear when we're in those abusive situations. Either when you hear the stories of really intense abuse survivors, whether it's like kidnapping, whether it's, you know, something of the like, right? Or when they're in an extremely abusive relationship, people will self-soothe in the sense of like, I'm going to get out of here, or like, I am safe, or he does love me. He does love me. We tell ourselves what we want to hear, not the actual truth of the matter. And there is a time, and obviously when you're in those intense abusive situations, where you do need to tell yourself what you want to hear, not what's actually happening. Often kids will do this. Kids will tell themselves like, or even that we'll gaslight ourselves of like, it was my fault. Dad does love me. Dad will protect me. Dad does this, or mom does love me. Mom will make me feel safe. Mom does keep me safe. Like it was my problem. Like mom is such an amazing mom. Mom does do everything for me. We tell ourselves what we want to hear. Okay. That is the stuff though that then programs people to think that abuse can be a sign of love, not like it's abuse. And that's why people can then also struggle to stay or struggle to leave. They stay for so long in abusive relationships because they essentially start telling themselves like, it's because he loves me. I was the one that upset him. I was the one that did the wrong thing. And it's because he loves me. It's because he loves me so much. It's because he gets jealous because he loves me so much. We then tell ourselves these sorts of things as a way to feel safer in a pretty unsafe situation. The next thing about the mum is it was very evidently clear that she projects all of her insecurities, which really can happen a lot with mums and daughters, projects all her insecurities onto Lily. For example, when Lily was about to go get the keys for the flower shop in the beginning of the movie, if you remember, so she's creating this flower shop and she's walking to get the keys for the flower shop. She's running late. She's on the phone to her mum. And her mum was just literally reading out these statistics of failure rates of flower shops. Like, what the fuck, right? Like, you're like, why is this helpful? It's not helpful. But what we actually ended up getting is that the mom actually said, it's because of how much she loves her. And what we need to understand, and what I want you guys to understand, is that when parents do this, or really, it can even be not a parent, it can also be a lover that does this. Like your partner might do this to you, and it's not because they don't, believe in you. It's actually because they don't believe in themselves and they're projecting that onto you. It's really a form of self-protection. We've kind of seen this, like there is an intense overprotection, of course, with Lily. Lily wasn't listening to it, thank goodness, of course. Like that's fabulous, we love that. Let's all learn from that part of her character. But for a lot of people, when their parents do this, they aren't able to recognize, or even not their parents but their lover, they aren't able to recognize that it is a projection of their own insecurity and fear of failure, right? It often comes from them failing at something, so they project that onto their child, or they project that onto their lover, in the hope that it will stop them from feeling the same shame that they felt when they failed at that thing, right? So that's where that comes from, when people are projecting their fear of failure onto you. So this won't just happen with, a parent-child dynamic. It can most definitely happen with a friend dynamic, with a lover dynamic. It doesn't mean like, oh my God, you have to leave the relationship toxic. It's two things. Like one, it might be about calling out the other person and potentially drawing a boundary. But also number two, it's really important to just even have that awareness of, this isn't actually about me. This is a projection of their own fear of failure. It also can, of course, be a projection of jealousy, where they don't want you to succeed because they haven't gone and done the things that they wanted to do in their life. So they're really jealous. It's not just about like, oh, she's jealous of, her opening a flower shop. It could simply be she's jealous that she never got to have the career that she wanted because of whatever reasons it was. Of course, we also kind of saw, this wasn't like a big thing, but I'll just mention it in case anybody's thinking about it. When the mum met Lily's boyfriend in a little bit, there was obviously that kind of like semi-obsession with the boyfriend, the obsession of like his looks, and also the obsession with the fact that he was a doctor. It wasn't about like, is she happy with him? How do you look after my daughter? How do you protect my daughter? It wasn't about him as a person. It was about his career, so what he does, and it was about his looks. I mean, we love a man with a good career and we love a man with good looks, but that's not everything. That's not going to last forever in a relationship. There's much more important things. Okay, so on that note, let's talk about Ryle. So Ryle is the macho, sexy, alpha male abusive guy, basically. That is Ryle. I mean, I loved that they put two hot men in a movie because, I mean, I am definitely Team Atlas. He is hotter. Obviously, he's not abusive. He is hotter because there is like a sense of safety with him that you just don't get from Ryle. Anyway, let's go into this. So obviously the first time Ryle and Lily meet, Lily's on the rooftop, and he kind of storms in and kicks the chair over, right? And then she sees him kick the chair over, and instead of him being like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there, he goes, strong chair, when he kicks the chair over, and she looks at him, right? So when he's saying strong chair, to me, it wasn't like a big red flag by any means, but obviously we then know what ends up happening. And so it was a little bit like, I remember the first time I watched it, I was a bit like, because a healthy man, not saying men can't kick over chairs, like men need to get their testosterone out, like their aggression, right? This is important to know. So when we say to men in general, like they can't be so aggressive, they shouldn't be so this, they shouldn't be so dominant, whatever, we're completely gaslighting their hormonal profile, because what we need to understand is like they have about 15 times the amount of testosterone a woman has. We feel the need sometimes to kick over a chair or to smash a few plates, correct? So when he's not had a successful surgery by the sounds of things, safe to say he's allowed to kick over a chair, right? So the wasn't about him kicking over the chair. Was about the way that he responded when he realized Lily was there. Because in my opinion, a healthy man would be like, oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. You didn't need to see that. Healthy men, healthy masculine men, do not want women being exposed to their aggression and their intense masculinity. Healthy masculine men want to protect the feminine and women from that, versus a guy that thinks kicking something quote unquote strong is okay in front of a woman. I know which one I would want to be with. I want to be around the man where I don't see the aggression. And I know men need to get aggressive sometimes, but they need to protect that from us, because if you're not going to get aggressive towards me and in front of me, like I don't then need to ever see it, because I don't want to know that you're capable of that, because obviously that can then make us feel a sense of unsafety, because we're animals at the end of the day. And it's like, wait, you're that strong? Like that's how angry you can get? Like, whoa. Of course, we fully then go into that oh my God, imagine if you were that angry at me kind of situation. So we shouldn't be seeing that. And this is something that I really learned from actually my husband, because it was a while ago, and he basically we were talking about like feminine masculine stuff or something. And he was like, there are things that you don't need to know. There are things that I talk about with my friends that you don't need to know. There are things about men that women don't need to know. And like that is actually a really important boundary. And he says that not in the sense of keeping a secret. He says that in the sense of, and he's explained this to me, of like, it is his job to protect me from that intense masculinity. We do not, as women, need to be exposed to that. And that's like a sexy thing. Like we then feel safe in that, but that's also, they are making us feel safe. They are providing the safety to us because they know. They're like, women don't need to see this. So they are expressing that side of themselves, which is healthy to do, in a safe space. Okay. I also just have to recognize, and I'm going to keep coming back to this kind of throughout the episode, we have to recognize his trauma of killing his little brother by accident. And of course, all of that suppression and what that's going to do. His abuse really just sounds like a manifestation of that trauma. That's what it really is, right? When he asked in this kind of same scene on the rooftop, when he asked about sex straight up of like, I want to have sex with you, that to me also is a little bit like okay, like again, nothing wrong with someone being like, I want to have sex with you. That doesn't immediately mean he's a bad guy. He's going to abuse you. So we can't, this is why I also like doing these episodes, because I like to break down for you guys. Take this show with a grain of salt, because a lot of young people, unfortunately, these days, they really just get programmed by this stuff. And so then as soon as a guy's like, I want to have sex with you, it's like, oh my God, you're a narcissist. Oh my God, you're going to abuse me. When actually it could just be that he's a really honest person and has no filter. However, in this kind of situation, I'm like, couldn't it have been kissing? Like, I want to kiss you. So really nothing against this, but I just wanted to mention it to you that if you're wanting a healthy relationship with a man, and hence the keyword relationship, not you just want to have a one night stand, that's fine too. But if you want a healthy relationship with a man, don't ever say yes to this. Make him see your self-respect, because that will make him then respect you. She said no, which is like, thank you very much. But they also ended up kissing after she then said, but how far? Oh, he said, how far would you go? And then she didn't say no. She was like, try me or whatever. So she then allowed him. So he kept pressing her. And, if I was in that situation, or if you were in that situation, what I would want you to be doing, for the ladies listening, is like, we're not going anywhere. I don't just like meet guys on rooftops and just let them like go where they want to go. If you want to get into my pants, you're gonna have to take me out to dinner first. So you can be playful and sassy back, but it's really about actually demonstrating the self-respect. Okay. Of course, what we have to acknowledge in this scene too, and like why this character Ryle is not just a bad guy, is that he was also asking her each step of the way, is this going too far? When they were like kissing, is this going too far? And she invited him to go further. So there's really like a lot of respect that he does show for her throughout the movie. It's not actually that he's a bad guy, which is also why it can be hard for women, because they'll be in these kind of situations, which is why I loved the complexity of his character, because women will be in these situations where there is so many good sides to their partner, but there's also the 5% of him that becomes abusive. And it's like, does that 5% outweigh the other 95%? Women will talk themselves into saying, no, it doesn't outweigh it. But actually, in my opinion, it does. And I also want to acknowledge that men get into this situation of they're with an abusive woman. Like, even though, of course, statistically, more women are abused than men, there also are men that are abused from women. Okay. Other thing to mention in terms of like, really manifesting your dream healthy relationship, for those of you listening, he also said early on the roof scene that love isn't for me, quote unquote. And so obviously if a guy said to me like, love isn't for me, I'd be like, all right, we're going to take that one. Like, we're going to keep that one, because if you're really like, love isn't for me, we need to remember that, because then how are you going to show up in the relationship? And can you even commit to this relationship? Obviously he did commit, but with other things happening. But why I want to mention this is that I bet that he is afraid, and we saw this then later on. When he said this, I was like, I bet that he's afraid of ruining something good. Like that was the whole thing as we got into the abuse. I was like, wow, he is so afraid of ruining something good. He's so afraid of losing somebody he loves and it being his fault, like it was with his brother. So of course he then keeps his distance. He doesn't do relationships. He doesn't do love, blah, blah, blah. And then of course, once he falls in love, he is so possessive of them that he like literally is not himself and then becomes abusive. Okay. I also want to remind everybody listening that is dating or getting into relationships. You don't necessarily know when you're getting into a relationship with somebody bad. Maybe there's a nudge, maybe there's red flags, or maybe there's not. And so like when we're seeing these first scenes with Ryle, it's like, okay, maybe like the kicking the chair was a red flag, but it also could have not been a red flag. And so whilst of course there definitely are some red flags early on for when some people are getting into abusive relationships, there's also sometimes not. And why I wanted to mention that to you is to make sure that you don't blame yourself of I should have seen the flags. I should have seen the flags. I bet you my intuition was telling me and I didn't listen to my intuition, because maybe your intuition was telling you, or maybe it wasn't. Right? Maybe there was no bad feeling. Maybe there was no intuitive nudge in the beginning. And so just also don't blame yourself if you have been in an abusive relationship, or if you currently are thinking that you're in an abusive relationship, or if you accidentally get into one in the future, of course, without trying. Okay, so now let's talk about them as a couple. So when they then ran into each other in the flower shop, went out for drinks, they agreed to be friends, beautiful, loved Lily's feminine magnetism. She was really making her chase him. She was really making him chase her in those scenes where they were agreeing to be friends, and like that was it. From what we are seeing on the screen still, there's no red flags. You know, somebody could potentially say, oh, well, Ryle was being too forward or pushy, but she also allowed it, right? It wasn't like she was telling him a hard no or anything, and then he was disrespecting that. And also, like, we want men, this is where it's get fucking confusing for men, because we're like, no, chase me, like, claim me. When I'm like, oh no, you're like, yes, I'm taking you out for dinner. And then when that's happening, and we obviously know in a movie, like, he's the abuser, when that's then happening, we're just like, he's too pushy, he's too that. And so with men, even in real life, like, we then engage in the same way. 1 minute they're not being like forward enough, the next minute they're being too forward. So it's also remembering like we had the autonomy to say no. She wasn't saying no yet, right? But actually then after they kissed, when they were like walking home, if you remember, he was like starting to walk her home, and they kissed, and he asked as well, like he didn't even plant one on her, he asked. Then she said, I'm going to walk myself home. And she said that in that very like matter of fact way, and he let her, right? So we're still like, okay, there's no controlling behavior, right? Which is why I really believe that the trauma came out with like the abuse, that trauma response, not to like, you know, give him, what's the word? Not to say that what he did was okay, whatever the word is. My brain is like not tying words together a little bit today. Not to say that, not to just say that we can excuse his behavior, but more so to just say that it really seems like for his character, because he started falling in love with her, he then became overly possessive, and he didn't know how to like communicate and express and regulate his nervous system. So he then went into that like physical place, which obviously wasn't good. Once they were at Lily's best friend's party, actually don't even know her name, but she was hilarious. Once they were at Lily's best friend's party, she did though, like, and they kind of met, they were up at the bar, whatever. She got a scotch. She was in that hot outfit. She did then actually say, stop following me around, stop showing up my flower shop, stop buying me flowers, etc., etc. And we saw in this moment, and a little bit more in the bedroom, where it was kind of like, does she want this or not? Right? And for the guys listening to this, you can tell a woman's body language and tone of voice if a woman, quote unquote, wants you or is not interested. And if you're not sure if a woman wants you or doesn't want you because she's like kind of playing that game, and you're like, I really can't figure out whether she's actually meaning it by like not being interested or whether she just wants me to try harder, just stop engaging and see if she then tries to engage a little bit, because that will then be like, okay, she actually is interested. She does want me, versus if you stop engaging for a little bit once you've tried, then how does that change things? Like, does she then just completely go MIA as well? Because she's like, oh, thank the Lord, he stopped engaging with me. But like her tone of voice and her body language and whatnot are the things to really be looking for. Okay, so now, I want to say we also have a history that we need to remember. With the way that Lily interacts with Ryle, we have to remember that she has a history of seeing men be very abusive. So she probably has some sort of belief that confident, controlling, dominant men like her dad are abusive. Now, obviously he was, but what I'm also saying is like, that is important for you guys to know, because you could be meeting some great man that is dominant and that is confident and whatnot. And if you've had a history of abuse, you might think he's going to be abusive when he's actually not going to be abusive. So just remember that. We can't assume that all guys like Ryle are abusive, because that's actually not the case. There are plenty of like really, really passive men. Trust me on this one. Worked with plenty of clients that are married to like extremely passive men that are actually abusive. So don't think it has to be like an alpha male, because it really doesn't. Well, this little update is for the gentleman. I'm very excited to be announcing that the man is finally open. It's back. It's fresh. It's revamped. It is amazing. This is basically my Queen Alchemy program for women, but for men. So it's all things trauma healing, embodiment, confidence, boundaries, speaking your truth. It's got all the things. So there's two options for you. There's a regular option or a VIP option. You can view everything, including the modules, the outline, what's included, about the program, etc., on the website page. I will link that for you below. And for the men listening too, if you haven't downloaded my Dude's Guide to Period Phases, trust me when I say that you should. It is a game changer, and it will save you a lot of teeth grinding in her luteal phase. So I'm going to do you the favor of putting both those links below, the freebie link for the Dude's Guide to Period Phases, as well as the link to check out my program, The Man. All right, let's jump back into the episode. All right, at this point, we're about 40 to 45 minutes into the movie if you want to like jump to where we're at. So here's the confusing thing. They're in the bedroom, they're making out. It's like this scene, right? He does ask for her consent, but he's also really seducing her. And then she keeps changing her mind from like no to yes to no, I don't want to have sex tonight, to then like, kind of thing. However, the first sign of him not having any emotional regulation was when they were making out and he's kind of going for sex, and she is like, I don't do casual relationships. I don't want to have sex, basically, is what she said. And he then gets up off the bed quite abruptly and is like, okay, we're going to bed. And he doesn't say this as kind of like a soft, like, all right, no worries, let's just go to bed. He says this in this very kind of like matter of fact, firm sort of way. And he just starts taking off his clothing. And when she's like, what are you doing? And looking at him, he just says, do you mind? And not in a sexy way does he say that, but in a very like passive aggressive, I'm pissed off with you, resentful, you won't have sex with me kind of way. And in that moment, you could definitely feel from like the viewer's perspective, you could definitely feel that it was starting to get a little bit uncomfortable. And here's the thing, a high quality woman that wants a healthy relationship would be like, okay, no worries. I'm going to leave. I'll see you later, and not just go to sleep with him. But she definitely got a little bit guilt tripped in that moment, or felt a little bit of shame for being like, I don't want to have sex with you. And so they ended up, I don't think they had sex, but they ended up sleeping in the same bed together. Not obviously the move to be making for the most part. It doesn't mean, ladies, you all have to like withhold sex on a first date. It means if you don't want to have sex and he's guilt tripping you or like kind of behaving in a weird way because you're like, we're not having sex, you then leave. You go home. And if he's really interested in you, he's phoning you, he's texting you the next day. Right? Like he's then respecting your decision and not being a child about it. Like you do not want a man where when you're saying no, he goes into a temper tantrum. Like he's essentially having an adult tantrum. That's not the vibe. And that's essentially what Ryle was doing. He was going into like a passive aggressive temper tantrum and really doing a little bit of like emotional manipulation and a bit of guilt tripping. All right. So let's just jump to Atlas now. So that's kind of been happening. Obviously, we then know that they start dating, like blah, 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 like not Atlas, sorry, Ryle and Lily start dating, whatever. That whole scene is happening and like nothing major has happened yet. They then go to the restaurant where Atlas works, whatever. Lily sees Atlas, etc. Firstly, we fucking love Atlas. Like he is sexy and I like him. What to me is like the most like oof sexy part about him is you can feel his true loving protection and unconditional love for her. Like you can feel the characters just fucking crush this. Like the music obviously really helps. So like people that made this movie, I'm like, you guys really did a great job. You can feel the difference in her connection with Ryle versus her connection with Atlas. I remember really, is it Ryle or Ride? It's Ryle. Yeah, I'm not butchering the names. If I am, whatever, we're rolling with it, obviously. You can feel the difference in the connection that she has, and you can feel the difference in the way the two men look at her and just the energy that they are giving off to her. His belief in her is obviously just gorgeous. The way that he looks at her, the way that he engages with her, and the way that she engages with him. It's that giggly, soft safety that you can feel in her body. And that, like that, what you see with how she behaves with him, I'm like, that, my friends, is the look of true love. That is the look of true love. Okay. So now we're going to jump to the oven scene where he went to grab the frittata or whatever that was burning and she handed him the oven mitt and he hit her. Now, we obviously don't know that, like, we don't know until towards the end of the movie that it was an intentional hit. It wasn't like a reflex. But what I want to kind of break down is here's the thing. When they first played the scene, you didn't fully know what happened, right? Like, was it just a knee-jerk reaction because the moron went to grab a piping hot oven tray? Like, okay, well, anyone would fling their hand back, but with that much power to cause a black eye, like if I think about it, if Hal was to reach into the oven and I was kind of standing where Lily was and go to grab the tray, he would fling his hand back and yeah, it might whack me in the face or whack me in the chest, but you're going to feel like a dead weight, right? Like you flung the hand back versus versus your muscles turning on and actually going to hit back. Two different things. When you fling your hand back, your muscles aren't like, I mean, I guess part of your muscles are on, but like your muscles are not on in the same way that they'd be on if you went to actually hit somebody. Completely different. And even Atlas later was like that was an accident. Like even he was like, that wasn't a fucking accident. You don't cause that much damage by accidentally hitting somebody, right? So that's the first thing. Like, do you really accidentally hit somebody with that much power? Here's the thing with abuse and abusive situations. Obviously, situations like we're human occur, like accidentally slamming the door in your partner's face because they're walking out of the bedroom as you're walking into the bedroom and you get there a second before and open the door and bam, right? Like that happens where you like, but you also have had the reflex really quickly to like put your hands out or whatever. But the power, the force, and of course the intuitive feeling is completely different compared to somebody intentionally going and slamming your door in the face or intentionally going and actually hitting you, right? Still, the oven situation is a hard one. That's the first one that we see. So obviously it leaves the viewers like, was that and like a hit or was that obviously an accident? The other situations, however, are much clearer in terms of abuse. The red flag though that happens after this oven situation is when they talk about it at dinner. They go out to dinner with his sister and his sister's husband. And that's when they find out that his sister's pregnant and whatever. And she sees Atlas at the restaurant again. When her sister asks, like, what the fuck happened to you two? Like a black eye and like your hands bandaged up. The red flag is him talking about it at dinner as a beautiful mess instead of talking about it as it was. Like, I still can't believe I hit her in the face. Like, I cannot, like, I can't believe I put my hand in. Like a masculine man who is like, my job is to protect you, would be beating himself up over that. Now, he might have been beating himself up over that, but we don't see that, right? So again, like there's so many layers to these situations, which is also why it can be so complicated and hard to get out of these abusive situations because it's not always clear cut. And when we love somebody, that obviously makes everything 10 times harder to see things logically. What I will say that's obviously adds complexity to this, like this is definitely not a black and white situation, is that we don't just see him as some narcissist and being a liar with all of his words because you can feel like this is Ryle. You can actually feel that he means when he says to Lily, all I want to do is protect you. When you stub your toe, I blame myself. Like, you can feel that he means that, because he was saying that at one point, and you actually can really see it in his eyes. He's just also burdened with this trauma of accidentally killing his brother, right? And so clearly his lack of emotional regulation comes out in these kind of abusive outbursts where he's angry at himself, or he's scared that he's about to be abandoned, right? So the oven situation, like in that moment, he's very angry at himself that he's put on this beautiful breakfast and he's literally burnt the fucking frittata, but he takes that anger out in an extremely unhealthy way. Obviously, with Lily and Atlas, they have a history. I'm not going to talk about their childhood, but it was obviously beautiful when they were like teenagers and stuff. They have a history of knowing each other, of being there for each other, and being through abuse together, because we saw that Lily's dad heavily abused Atlas as well. So the difference in how she interacts with the two men that you can kind of see so far is Lily seems to kind of be a little bit on high alert. You can almost sense, because she obviously doesn't have the same feeling of safety with Ryle that she gets with Atlas. With Atlas, there is this feeling of, I've known you forever. And truly, when you're in a relationship that will last a lifetime, there is this sense of ease. It doesn't mean that there aren't, moments where things are hard. Like, of course, we're all human. Relationships are inherently challenging. But at the start of a relationship, it should feel easy and effortless on both sides. And we don't get that same feeling of effortlessness with Lily and Ryle as we do with Lily and Atlas. And like, they've come together years later as adults, and you immediately feel the effortlessness. And it's like they haven't even engaged with each other in X amount of years' time. And obviously, you're a completely different person when you're a teenager to when you are an adult for the most of us. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next situation. And this is where when Ryle finds Atlas's number in the back of Lily's phone, between the phone and the case, he doesn't go calmly and ask for an explanation. No, he smashes a fucking lamp whilst she's on the phone to her mum in the other room. Like, she can hear the smashing of the lamp, and he's fuming, which, look, from one perspective, I understand. He said anybody else but him, anybody else but him. Why did he say, by the way, anybody else but him? Because he obviously feels threatened by their love, because they don't have the same love, right? And he's so afraid of being being the guy that she doesn't pick, and feeling like he wasn't enough, feeling like he failed, etc. Right? Because obviously, like, he ticks a lot of boxes in terms of money and wealth and like career and all these sorts of things, but he can't compete with the love that has been between Lily and Atlas. So when he finds that number, like, on one perspective, I understand the jealousy. I understand the pain that could bring. But also, there's no ability for him to be empathetic or compassionate on her side, because she also just told him that her dad was abusive and Atlas was worried. And he then goes, oh my God, I was such an idiot, of course. And then I punched him. Like, of course he would have been worried. Of course he would have been worried when he saw the black eye. So he doesn't put two and two together of like, oh, Atlas has given the phone number, like, in case SOS, like, he's just trying to be a good friend. He then thinks like she's cheating on him or whatever it is. So in my opinion, a phone number for an SOS seems pretty reasonable, especially given the fact that Atlas saw her with a black eye and he was clearly very aggressive towards him, right? He didn't just go up and then like talk calmly. He started like a pretty aggressive fight and then kept instigating the fight. It was not like he was the one that was like, whoa, whoa, bro, let's talk about this. Like, let's talk about this. He also kept fighting as well. Then he slaps the phone, or the phone number, whatever it was, out of her hand as he storms out of the room. So like, she's like consoling him, like, baby, no, let me explain. So she now takes his projection. She then shames herself. She's mad at herself. She's feeling guilty. Let me explain, right? And of course, there's two sides to this. Part of it is like, yeah, like, you're like, oh my God, no, like, let me explain, and you're feeling emotional. There's also a part of it where it's like, what the fuck? Like, why are you making this mean something that it doesn't mean? Anyway, the most important part, obviously, is like, we talk about unsafety in the relationship. So no calm communication. There's no understanding. There's no listening or space for a conversation and listening to be had. He just jumps to his own conclusions because of his trauma, and he's trying to protect himself, right? This is when he then storms into the staircase of the building. She's chasing after him, trying to like console him, get him to listen, etc. and like saying, I'll stop talking to him. I'll stop talking to him. By the way, if you have to stop talking to like a friend of yours or anything, that needs to be a full conversation, not just like a trauma response of, okay, I'll stop talking to him. Cause now you just have two people like literally trauma bonding. So anyway, she's like, okay, I'll stop talking to him, etc., etc. And then, so she's like chasing after him. This is when he then pushes her down the stairs. And when she wakes up, he tells her to repeat his words after her. We're now in full swing of an abusive relationship. If she, quote unquote, tripped down the stairs, she would have remembered struggling. She would have grabbed a railing and maybe rolled her ankle or broken a wrist or whatever by trying to break her fall. But splitting her head open and going unconscious, like, yeah, they were concrete steps, but she would have caught her fall because we saw her right there on the side of the railing. It wasn't like she was on the other side of the railing. It wasn't like, she was in high heels or anything else that could have added to like not being balanced. Okay, so she obviously she was pushed down the stairs and her head then hit the stairs and there was no opportunity to break her fall because there was another person forcing her down the stairs, not falling. When you fall, you have that reflex of grabbing something to obviously have you not fall. Okay. When she's lying in bed, her body is a full freeze response once she wakes up and he's then telling her, tell me it's nothing. Tell me it's nothing. And you can really tell by the scene that she's in a fawn response because she's not saying very much. She's kind of frozen. She doesn't feel safe. She might tell herself it's all okay, but she knows, and you can feel that she knows that nothing is okay. There has now obviously been multiple incidences in what we assume is a short amount of time with her being hurt because of him. So the red flags are red people. The red flags at this point are redding. Guys, I wanted to remind you, if you haven't seen my new masterclass, The Blueprint to Feminine Embodiment, you are going to want to check it out. This masterclass is literally like 2 hours of just pure nuggets. Think about the nuggets on my Instagram stories, all piled in the most juicy, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing masterclass format. We have slides, we have pictures, we have no slides, we have just the whole thing. Okay. Make sure you watch it. I cannot tell you just how incredible the information is in this. And it's 2 hours long. Those of you that have watched it, I cannot even begin to tell you how many messages I've gotten of how is this free. So if you haven't already watched that, you're going to want to. We also have a bunch of other masterclasses there on the Masterclass Vault, which is also a new section on the website page, which I'm really excited about. So I'm going to leave that there. The Blueprint to Feminine Embodiment Masterclass. You're going to want to watch it, especially if you are on a journey of healing your trauma so that you can actually be in your feminine. Okay, so now we're going to jump to the kind of next abusive scene. So she's falling down the stairs. We kind of don't really see that much from here of her living her life with a split open head kind of thing. It then kind of just goes to the next sort of scene. Not much happens. So this is where she is home and Ryle gets home and brings the magazine where Lily's in the top 10 places in Boston or whatever. And this bit, I was like, oh my God, this makes me feel sick. This bit is where he makes her read out loud the summary of what Atlas says about the origin story of his restaurant. This is the most important thing, even when she says, I don't want to, he says, keep reading. This whole scene is just fucking abusive. He's forcing her to keep reading even when she keeps saying no. He's obviously read it, right? He is being emotionally abusive by making her read this thing out loud as a form of punishment. You cannot punish your person for their past. Let me say that again. You cannot punish your person for their past. One of you actually asked me this question. We were doing a bit of a Q&A on my stories recently of it was something like, how do you get over your partner's past or something? And it's well, if you aren't okay with your partner's past, you don't unconditionally accept them and love them, then you shouldn't be with them. It's not fair to hold your partner's past against them. You have to choose to love all of them, not just a part of them. And he is not loving all of her by any means, right? She's obviously freaking out. His blood is boiling with this trauma response of him going into fight mode. He's really going into that fight mode. She's trying to play sweet with him. She's obviously getting emotional and feeling very trapped and very unsafe. And instead of him remaining calm and talking about the fact that he feels threatened by Atlas and feels threatened by their history and doesn't, know that and doesn't know how he feels about the fact that maybe she still loves him, blah, blah, blah. He starts trying to have sex with her when she's literally saying no. And she's saying no, and no, we know this scene. She's trying to get him off of him. She's saying everything possible to essentially make him like get out of the trauma response, like get out of this response of like, oh my God, she doesn't love me, she's going to leave me, etc., etc. We obviously then see he doesn't do it, but then he tries to rape her and gets very aggressive. She's at this point, we all know, saying no. Her body language is extremely stressed, short breath, very scared. And at this point, like his quote unquote love for her is really just making him possessive, emotionally dysregulated, and scary because I'm assuming, again, like we've said, of his fear of feeling loss again because of his brother and that not making him think clearly. We know she's obviously finally able to get him off her. She runs to her car and then goes straight to Atlas's restaurant. Atlas is there to like save the day. Like, oh, we love that. Like, yes, thank you. And this is where we really start to then see all the flashbacks to the times where he hurt her, starting with the oven, where it was actually abuse. Where for the oven, for example, we saw she tapped him on the shoulder gently when he opened the oven to give him an oven mitt, and he forcefully turned around and hit her. He pushed her down the stairs. Like it's very clear. It's very clear that as soon as, he started feeling like he was falling for her, his way of making himself feel powerful is through not just being aggressive, but also being violent towards the other person to feel like he's the one in control. She then obviously finds out she's pregnant, like has that whole thing. There's obviously more scenes. I'm just talking about the like abuse ones because that's going to give you guys the most education. And she gives birth to her baby girl, which is obviously beautiful. He is there. So there's still like that semi part of like the relationship. Here is the real power move that really shows the worth that she has in herself. This is Lily. Even when after the birth and he's there in the hospital room, he promises to get help. And she's like drugged up on like oxytocin and dopamine of a new baby, right? That would be the time where the woman is like caves and is like, all right, whatever, fuck it. Like come back into my life. She doesn't. Even when he promises to get help, that he'll change, that it will never happen again, she doesn't allow it. She doesn't say, okay, another chance. She asks for a divorce. Instead of believing that he'll change, she knows from seeing her dad that people that are abusive can change maybe, but it takes a really, really long time, or they don't change. Like her dad didn't change. I'm glad that she left him. I'd rather her leave him and cut that cord completely. And if they come back together and he's really become a changed man and he's done all this work on himself and like healed everything, and she can see that and feel that, then they can cross that bridge when they come to it if that happens. But honestly, for a man to abuse a woman that violently and that many times in a short period of time, she doesn't need to believe that he'll change. She has no obligation to believe that he will change. We're not asking him to change from like, oh, babe, like stop procrastinating. Like we're not asking that. We're referring to something that is a physical abuse, right? She needs to protect herself and she needs to get out of harm's way, not just for her, but also for her baby. Plus, we all love Atlas. God, he's so hot. We love Atlas. What I will say to wrap up with is what I do really respect about Ryle was that he let her walk. He didn't keep talking shit to her or guilt tripping her or trying to get her to change her mind. He didn't gaslight her. When she said, I want a divorce, when she said, like, if our daughter said that a man was abusing me, blah, 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 what would you say to him? Like, he was confronted with it and he dropped his ego. He didn't gaslight her. And all of that, I think, is worth us just mentioning. Like, there is a part of me that still can have respect for Ryle towards the end because of how he actually acted with her being like, nope, we're not staying together. And I think that is worth mentioning. I'm saying this is worth mentioning because not everybody just chooses to be abusive because they're malicious people or because it's a power trip. In this situation, he was abusive mostly because of his fear of losing her. He couldn't emotionally regulate that fear. And so then he became like the worst version of himself, right? And so obviously we hope that his character goes and gets help and does all the amazing things. But I also would like to see a part 2 where her and Atlas live happily ever after and they have another baby and we just see this like safe, beautiful love because Atlas gives her this safe, beautiful, grounded, regulated love, which is what every single one of us can have and every single one of us deserves. I hope that you guys loved that episode. Please make sure, as usual, that you share the episodes on your Instagram stories, because when I see them, when you tag me, they really mean the world. And I'm always open to other suggestions about podcast episodes. We have a running list, which is actually really helpful for me. So make sure that you keep those coming. If you haven't left a written review, I would also so appreciate if you could just take 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes or less, to write some really kind words. Send a screenshot of it to media@monicayateshealth.com, and we'll give you a little gift in return. I appreciate all of you that listen to the episode the podcast religiously. I appreciate all of you that share it with your friends. And most importantly, I appreciate all of you that just cheer me on, whether it's in DMs, sending us a beautiful email. All of those little things do not go unnoticed. Olivia sends them all to me, and they make me just feel so warm and fuzzy inside. So thank you all. I will see you in the next episode.